After an unprecedented couple of years of hardship, many companies are adapting to the quote unquote new normal. HR and talent leaders are developing new playback books for their organizations, hoping to sustain optimal team performance and build employee centric cultures in a permanently flexible kind of way. As we continue to explore how to activate employee powered cultures and create a greater sense of belonging, we've invited many 4A's voices and agency leaders from across the industry to share their own perspectives today on two different important topics: how they see the great resignation affecting the industry in the long term, and what is the one big change they predict in the talent space over the next 12 months. Throughout today's live stream, you will get to enjoy their responses.
Hi, I'm Rihanna Johnson, VP Director of Growth Strategy at Deutsche LA. I'm also the co-founder of 3's a Crowd, and I'm the lead for the N for 13 initiative. Long term, I see the great resignation having an impact on the industry in a positive way. This is a great opportunity for us to dismantle a lot of the historical thinking, processes, and practices that we've had in HR for years. It's also a good opportunity for agencies to become more creative in how they retain and attract talent.
Before we welcome our next guests, we invite you to interact with our moderators, our speakers, and each other. So please don't be shy and make sure to use that chat feature to the right of your video player. As I shared earlier, chatting with others, even virtually, is a way to connect, build your community, and even unknowingly inspire someone. Please use that chat tab to chat with other attendees. You never know what your thought or comment might even lead to. And just as importantly, we encourage you to also share any questions you have for our speakers as you are watching. As speakers in a virtual world, we really want to hear from you. Is what we are saying resonating? What else is important for you to understand? To submit these questions directly to the speakers, you want to type those in the Q&A tab. And now on to our next session. The world, as we know it, has shifted significantly over the past 2+ years as COVID accelerated change. Workforce transformation is difficult at any time, but the pace accelerated during the pandemic has really revolutionized our world and jobs as talent and people leaders. And yet, armed with the right skill, this uncertainty has also offered leaders opportunities to look beyond the return to normal and to purposely begin to shape a workforce fit for a different future. This panel that we're about to see, moderated by Claire Telling, Chief People Officer of Havas North America, will discuss the return to the office and things we can do to adapt to a new future of work. Please join me in welcoming Claire.
Hi, everyone. And first of all, thank you to 4a's for having me. I have always really loved this event in person. It's just been such a phenomenal way to connect with other peers in our talent community and share ways of upholding each other and making our industry better. And I really can't wait till this event happens in person again. First of all, so I don't have as many tech issues with my phone and my laptop, but also so we can see each other again, have these great hallway conversations, have better connections. So I think it's kind of ironic today that I'm moderating a panel on returning to office. And today's topic, we have some phenomenal people here. We're going to talk about innovations as it relates. Oh, there's a Zoom. Sorry, there's somebody coming in on my phone. We're going to talk about how we can move beyond return to office and really start to shape a workforce that is fit for the future. So let's dive right in. I'd love my panelists to each introduce themselves and tell us about your company's current return to office plans. So let's start with Eileen.
Hi, Claire. Thank you. Nice to see you and the others here virtually. Yes, I agree with you. It'd be nice to have this session in person, and that will happen at some point, hopefully sooner than later. Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen Benwit. I am the Chief Talent Officer at Horizon Media. And we are still in a voluntary return, meaning we're opened on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and we've created what we call as a cohort schedule, where each team has a designated day that they will go in at their choosing. So each team has 2 days per month. So if you want to go in, at your choosing. You know that your peers are going to be in on a specific day. And we've been in this mode for quite some time, and we're staying in that mode this month and next month. And then we're going to reassess how we move forward after April.
Great. Kate, tell us about your plans.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Kate Higgins, Chief Growth Officer at Eric and Coleman. So our agency's in a normal world based out of San Francisco. Of course, here we are, no normal. Poor Claire had some tech issues right before, but she handled it. Camp just slid right in right before we started on her phone, which is awesome. Way to go, Claire. We've just recently done pretty much, Eileen, what you just described, which is we're like, we call it kind of a bit of a soft opening of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office for the folks that live in San Francisco. And we went through a lot of deliberations, like I think a lot of you have done probably, and talked with a lot of our clients. And for a while we had like, oh, come in when you want to. And that's okay. But then it just got hard for scheduling. I think, Claire, like the whole point of just knowing like your team and who is your team and like wanting the right people to be in the office at the right time. It just felt right to sort of just pick 3 days, lock it down. Not everyone has to then deal with like all of a sudden figuring out how to commute again in a world where we're just like not used to doing that and all those sorts of hurdles. But I think for the most part, we're hearing a lot of people are excited to come back and be with each other. So that's what we're currently doing.
Great. And Renew.
Thanks, Claire. Renew Huda, Chief Talent Officer for Axiom, Kinesso, and Matterkind. We're part of Interpublic Group. And our approach is slightly different than both of you. We started out with should we ask people to come in a couple of days a week? And the feedback we received from our employees was like, actually, no, we want to focus on moments that matter to us. And those are the moments and connection points we want to be in the office. So staying true to our values of truth, togetherness, and trailblazing, we pivoted to our, we're calling it flexible by design / moments that matter schedule, and then see how that's going to go. And what we've said to our employees from day one is like, we're going to constantly continue listening to you and pivot this, because this is, we're all figuring it out as we go. I think Kate used the analogy of building this plane as we're flying. So we are flying, and we're going to continue adding on features and maybe eliminating unnecessary features as we go along in it. So we're putting the power in our managers' hands to be able to say, here are in any given quarter, these are the 4 or 5 things that we want you to lead from your bringing the team's perspective, bringing them together from a client perspective and business perspective. They're important to us to continue to innovate. And if those are fulfilled, then it's up to you and your teams to be wherever you want to be and work from wherever you want to work from.
Yeah, I think a lot of us probably have made some mistakes along the way. Over these last couple years. And we are learning as we go along. And I sit in our office today, which actually feels like it's starting to come back to life. But tomorrow, it may be quite different. So what are some real best practices that you are now implementing that you feel pretty confident about and that you will take with you moving forward as it relates to return to office and guidelines? Yeah, Renee, why don't you start?
One of the things for last, I would say, year and a half, we've been really focusing on is our leaders. So we've created this in-house grown training called Leading from Distance. And what does that mean? So how do you lead from distance? Because there is always the individual point of view that sometimes, because there could be a leader that wants all of his people in the office all day, every day. And then there's a leader that, you know what, is perfectly okay never to see their employees. But we're creating the best practices. And so part of the training Leading from Distance, it teaches our leaders and it's more about creating the community with their teams and discussing what is important to the teams, and then creating that environment for their teams to be able to talk about, okay, how often are we going to meet? What does that look like? So that's part of our Leading from Distance. And I think it's then obviously like we're focusing quite a lot on how to navigate hybrid meetings as well, because there's going to be times we're living in a hybrid world, which is previous to COVID. If you were on a call, you were sort of forgotten because people didn't see you in the room. So now we've re-equipped our offices to have Microsoft Teams where we can see people that are on the call and their videos are on there. So they're not feeling forgotten because they're on the call. And then obviously our focus then is the third focus is managing remote teams. So what does it mean to manage people remotely? And what are the various connection points you need to continue to have to make sure your people are constantly feeling valued and appreciated and seen and heard?
What are some of those connection points? Because then I want to hear from Eileen and Kate what they're doing. But just curious, what are some of those connection points that you are insisting that the managers have with their team to create that connection?
I think our first one is like when we're thinking about our objectives for every given year. So in the first quarter, our focus is what are the things we're going to accomplish and achieve this year. I think coming that together and sitting in a room together and discussing, you want to be in a room together to be able to discuss and create those objectives for the teams. So that's one of them. And I think that we're also saying once a quarter, we want the teams to come together just for a bit of a social fun as well. So that there are so many times the networking, the relationship gets built when you're not on a screen. So it's sort of like the team lunches and perhaps team drinks. We're doing that once a quarter. That needs to happen as part of our connection. And then our third one is obviously like when you have pitches and client pitches that need to happen, rehearsal for those pitches, we're going to be in the room together because you can sense out the better chemistry with each other and how each other will work in that environment. So those are the few top of the line things that we've asked the leaders. Obviously we're a technology company, so we have product roadmaps, which are 3-day long sessions once a quarter. 3 days being on a screen is extremely hard for everybody. So we're advising perhaps anything that's a multiple day session that needs to happen, we need to come together. So I think those are the things that we're thinking about, Claire.
Yeah. Eileen, what are you doing at Horizon?
So there's 3 pillars that we've been focusing on, and I was just going to say it's about the return, but it's really more about the hybrid. Because we're always going to be remote. We're always going to be in a situation where we have people in office and elsewhere. And so that mindset, and I find myself having to continuously refresh and remind myself that it's not going to be an all in office. We're always going to have people working in and then through technology like we're doing today. So the three pillars that we are focusing on is flexibility, community, and connection. And I think the challenge is like, how do we do that? The truth is we've all been doing it for the past 2.5 years. We have been fostering connections in new ways because we've had to. So I don't want to lose what we've already achieved. I want to enhance it and push it forward in a way that will just solidify the relationships. And what we're focusing in on is creating community circles where we're going to bring employees together based on likenesses, differences, interests, teams that they're working on, clients that they're working on, and create these really support circles so that you're connecting not just with the people on your team, but you're connecting with everyone across the organization to strengthen relationships, to strengthen partnerships, and to support through these peer-to-peer networks. And I think the effect of that will create and foster informal mentoring, and put in a greater emphasis on the positivity and the cascading impact of the relational experience. And that's something that I will probably sprinkle throughout our conversation is the emphasis on the relational experience, because we have it, but we need to recognize it and the role it plays in productivity and the way it contributes to culture.
I mean, I love that idea of the peer-to-peer groups. And I want to come back to that because digging into creating deeper relationships and connections over Zoom versus in person, I think we need to dig into that a little bit more. We'll come back to that. And I want to hear about from Kate what she and her team are doing.
Yeah, and I won't go through. I mean, there's definitely things that you guys have said that we're kind of focused on. So I'll just try and kind of hit maybe things that you guys haven't talked about. And I do think It's funny, Claire, when you were talking about the things that we've learned over the last couple of years, and Zoom happy hours are not that happy. They're just really not. And it's not. It seemed like a great idea, I think maybe in April of 2020, and then it just promptly fell, like for us. By summer, it was like, this is the worst thing ever. So I think one of the things, as it relates to just being flexible, I think maybe Renew, I think you might have been talking about this, is yes, we've sort of said these are the days that we're in the office, but to the point of when there are big meetings or there is something that's happening, and it might be more than just those couple of days, but then the reverse of that is also, and if there's not, that's okay as well, right? So we don't want to have it be where no one's ever in the office. But I think the flexibility that we've all sort of learned through this whole process is, I think we've gotten a good handle on what we know can happen like this, and then things that we know that are better when they actually happen in person. And so the way that we've tried to replicate things that should be happening in person that aren't, the hallway chatters, all that kind of stuff, is, pick up your phone, actually use your phone. It's sort of funny, the flip I think that we've had in terms of me personally, my relationship with the phone. I hate phone calls. I don't know why, but I kind of do. I don't mind Zoom, but then all of a sudden, because of all this, I find phone calls to be way more intimate than I think they ever were before, because all of a sudden it's just you and me, and you're in my ear and I'm in your ear, and we're able to sort of talk without it being kind of this weird and how do I look and whatever. So I think we've tried to encourage people to use their phones. And then I also think doing really small virtual meetings where it's just a couple of people. If I've got someone new that started, I'll park on Zoom with them for 3 hours. And not that we're really on Zoom, but we're kind of more in that, like, we're working together, where you'll get up, you'll go, you'll come back, or did you catch that? So you're trying to kind of have it be less like a presentation and more of a work session. So I think, I think for us, the flexibility is a really big part of it, and knowing what our teams need. And we just keep learning. Well, we've learned a lot with clients and pitches. If they're not in the room with us, then it doesn't make sense for us to all be in a room together, because the dynamic is weird. And so, if we're all going to be on Zoom, we're all on Zoom, and everybody, people will be in the office, but they're all in their own office on Zoom. So it's a little bit more personal. We're like this versus we tried a couple of times where it's like you get 5 people in a room, and then all of a sudden everyone else that's on this platform just has no idea what's going on in the room. And it just feels really exclusionary in a way that's not so great. So hopefully that covered more than you asked for, but I think that was kind of those are my high points.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Good luck getting this, a younger generation to talk on the phone, because I think it's something they're, very, very averse to. But I think, tremendous potential in talking on the phone. One thing that we've started to do in our team a little bit is walk and talks. So take your dog for a walk, go outside for 5 minutes, you go get a coffee, I'll get a coffee. Something, again, that fosters that connection, that is a little more personal, that doesn't feel so formal. So I want to talk about something that there seems to be a lot of nervousness around the discrepancy between generations in the office. So some groups of people want to come in, some people don't, and this can actually create some biases towards those people who aren't coming in. And we know that there are people, if they're not seen in the office, they may not get a promotion. They may not, get the mentoring that they need. So how are you going to manage the dynamics of the managers who are in the office versus those who are remote? And how do we prevent biases from creeping in? Anybody want to jump in on this one, Kate?
I'll jump in first. And I don't know that we will. That's not me being a downer. I'm really not. I'm quite an optimistic person. But I think biases just are always there, right? But I do think, I'm a little bit hopeful. I'm actually a lot bit hopeful that I think we're at least aware of a lot more biases than I think we were 5-10 years ago. And so, but I think it's having some hard conversations, I think, as leaders of organizations, when you start to kind of hear a little something brewing about someone, or, ooh, this person I think is ripe for the promotion, but this person isn't, having your review system really in place, and making sure that review system, whatever your system is, that it is set up to do right by the employee, and not what is comfortable for the manager giving the review, right? And so, and I say that really strongly through the filter of creatives, because if any of you worked with creatives, you know just how much they hate to do reviews. It's just not in their DNA, and they just want to say, I like that person. They're doing great work. Let's promote them. And then you're like, but why not them? And they're like, I don't know. And you're like, we probably could do better to figure out what it is that we want from our people. And so I think holding ourselves accountable to know that we're, aware of those, aware of the biases to the extent that we can be. And when they start to pop up, call yourself on it, call your teammates on it and say, I can think of a couple of people where there were thoughts, like a long time ago, like, oh, I don't know about this person. It was like, well, we got to lean in. And it's like awkward to do it over. And then you do, and you lean in. And next thing you know, that person's a bit of a superstar a year and a half later. So that's, the generational thing. I don't know if I have a solve on that one, but I think it kind of falls into the same camp for me.
Eileen, any?
Yeah, I agree with what Kate has shared. This is going to be a real challenge. And I've already heard in some instances, both from employees and leaders, about the concerns of promotability, growth, opportunities, visibility, etc., working remotely. And we can't let that happen. I think it is going to happen for sure, but we have to do everything that we can not to let that happen, because if we're saying that we are going to hire around the country, which I think we are all doing as a remote, that's one of the advantages that has come out of the past 2.5 years, is that we have opened up the geography from which we're recruiting. So if we're embracing that and we're recruiting from all over the country, we can't then turn around and penalize people for working remotely. So philosophically, I think we're all aligned with this idea, but it is absolutely going to be a challenge. And I think, Kate, to your point with the performance reviews, creatives aren't the only ones that really don't like doing performance reviews. I think most people don't like doing them, unfortunately. It's one of those necessary evils, I guess, of corporate life. But I think we have to keep the discourse current. I think we have to challenge ourselves. And when we see it, if we see something, say something, and we can't let it go. And it's really confronting some difficult conversations and confronting the challenge of what this represents, and perhaps put in better checks and balances, or at least challenge what we have in place when people are either given an opportunity, whether it's through performance reviews or other, because there's things that are happening. It's just not about promotability. There's so much that is in play. That we have better checks and balances in place to at least challenge and understand the decision-making of our leaders. And the relationship, I think, between some of the HR business partners and leaders and employees within the community to kind of surface and unearth everything that's going on is going to be really important.
I wonder if there's a way to bake into the review process a question that gets the hiring manager to think, like, are you being fair to this person's remote situation? Again, to your point, a lot of this is going to be raising the awareness, and we do raise that awareness by talking about it and institutionalizing it. Renew, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the matter.
I mean, I think Kay and Eileen dealt with it bang on. It's like just calling out the biases and being aware of it. But I think it's what we're trying. Like I said, I think we're flying this plane and building it. What we're trying out, a new thing is like really, instead of making it about the performance reviews and performance management, we're starting to just change some of the vocabulary to settle into, actually, if you're afraid of performance review, these are performance enablers. What are the various enablers that we can help? And then how can we bring in the consistency and transparency across our processes? Because one thing I do hear from our teammates, they're like, hey, I don't know why did that person get promoted? So how do we come up with the consistent processes and some of the basics? We sort of, because we were in the offices and we may have sort of just not forgotten about the basics. So just go back to the basics. What is important? How do we bring in the transparency? How do we talk about those processes? And how do we continue to make sure and put some of the power back into our people's hands? So we're starting a practice within the talent community, like career coaching. So we're hiring a career coach, and then the career coaching practice hopefully takes on where they are in tune with their employees and are bringing that additional insight to the leaders and to the managers on regular basis. It's very on the early on stages. We're hoping that can help us drive some of these biases out.
And to this point about the performance reviews in a hybrid world, are there new ways of defining what productivity means in an agency? When you are partially remote, are you noticing that? I mean, Eileen, I think we were talking about that the other day. Like, how do you now define what productivity means and good performance? Is it the end result? Is it the work? Does that, is there any new ways that you all are rethinking about productivity?
Well, I think, I keep bringing it back to the relational experience, because while we know that the businesses that we are all in is relationships, it's all about relationships and networking. But I think because of the working remotely and through technology, we all have a sense that we're not connecting with people, but we actually are. We're still connecting with people. Like we're still engaging. We're doing it in a different way, and there's a different sensory experience through technology versus being in office. And so I think we realize we miss the connection. We miss the ability to be together, real time, live. So I think the relationship or the relational experience is part of the productivity, but we don't necessarily think about it. So I think it's reframing what we used to say as we're in the relationship business. Really, what does that mean, and how do we put greater emphasis, and how is there a metric to the relational experience? What relationships have you established? Who are you fostering relationships with? What relationships are you repairing as a result of whatever? And is there a way to put more metrics on the relational experience? That's really where my mind goes, but still figuring it out.
So baking that into KPIs as an example.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty powerful. That's very powerful. Probably more important now than ever, quite frankly.
But it also is not tangible, right? It's not like there's not like a specific outcome as a result of it. That's what makes it so challenging, but probably even more important as a result.
Yeah.
I think just dovetailing off of that, Eileen, I think as I was hearing you talk, it was making me realize I think the 360 nature of the review is a really big part of that. I think to sort of try and figure out, like, what does productivity mean? Yes, Claire, you're right. It's the end product, right? Were you supposed to get to that shoot? Did you get to the shoot? Did the campaign go live? Did you place the media buy? Whatever those very, very tangible things are, great. We all know those. But then the softer things that are harder to discern because we're not all in the same space and you're not seeing it. On one hand, I can think of people who I think have benefited, who might be more introverted and can just crush when they're not having to sit and be awkwardly with people, or if they're even like anxious, or they're just someone who just doesn't like to be around a bunch of people, which we've figured out there's a decent amount of people that are like that. I'm not one of them, but I feel for those people, right? So I think the softer metrics to try and figure out how are you doing that? I think in the 360 part, if you're getting your peers to take a minute and talk about it, that's a really neat way to find out, like, how are they doing in terms of building the relationship part when the world has sort of cut that away from them. We're still doing it, but we're just not doing it the way we're supposed to do. So, I mean, Claire, it's a great question. I don't think we've spent a lot of time thinking about productivity, I'll be honest, just outside of just the timeline of the scope and the things you're supposed to do and the things you're supposed to do to get from A to B. But I like, Eileen, I like where your head is going, thinking about relationships, thinking about how they build in this world, and then how can we either track it and then also help mentor and shape and guide them. So
it is, yeah. I mean, it's the means to the end, right? So we know that our clients aren't paying us because the relationships we're establishing within our organizations, but the results of the connection, the community, the collaboration, the partnership is what's allowing us to produce the work that they're seeing at the end of the day and which they're actually paying for. So it's definitely part of it. It's a question of how do we amplify it in a way that maybe we can make it tangible. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think just to add on to that, I think there is an aspect of we are all delivering, meeting those timelines and deadlines. I think you said, Kate, where there are times where people are actually that were introverts. Now they're crushing it because they're constantly just opening up the laptops and meeting those objectives. But one of the issues and challenges we're seeing right now is that people are starting to get pretty close to the breaking point, the burnout, which I know, like, the word itself is causing burnout, just hearing it so many times. As we're trying to keep a pulse on that for our people, because it's been so easy to just open the laptops and start working. So I think, and people are are trying to build those relationships. And now, starting now, the world is opening up a little bit, which is, the weather is getting nicer in New York, so people are going out there and talking to people. So the relationships are happening. But I think there's this, now you've been a hermit for almost 2 years, going out and starting to build those connections. I was in the office 2 days straight last week, and I found it exhausting. And I get my energy from other people. So I just 2 days of just constantly, because here I can just like, okay, I'm gonna just go off camera for a second, breathe in, breathe out, and jump into the meeting. You can't do that now face to face. And that was the biggest aha moment to me, being in the office. It's going to be training. So how do we help our people with that mental health aspect of it that keeps, hopefully, the productivity and the objectives levels at a high? So we haven't cracked the code, but it is on top of my mind for sure, that how do we tackle it for our people?
Yeah, it's
we
so
talk
true.
a lot about. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Eileen.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, because I had a similar experience being in the office. There's a certain sensory overload, and then you combine that with what I think we are all experiencing, and maybe not talking about it quite as much, is somewhat of a post-traumatic stress issue coming out of the past 2.5 years. So the whole idea of mental health is one that really is going to be at the forefront and will be the emerging, and already is, needed benefit that we have to provide for our communities.
Yeah.
I think we talk a lot about how do you create friendships at work? How do we go back to fostering that? And really, I don't think as an industry we are quite prepared for what that looks like if we're actually not physically in the office. So kind of as a last question, any thoughts on how do you foster culture and foster friendships that hopefully could prevent burnout when you're not physically together? Beside, we've talked about Zoom happy hours not working, but anything else that you can think of to foster and define what your culture as an agency or as a business means when you're not together all the time?
I mean, am I on mute? No, I'm not. I'll jump in just so, and I think, Eileen, this was something you were saying about the mentoring at the very beginning when you were talking about part of the 3 pillars that you have, and one of the things being the community piece and connecting people together. I think on some fronts, as we've grown a lot, being a smaller agency, to a place where we're now bigger, that not everybody knows everybody, even just through Zoom, right? So that's a thing. And I think we've started to realize, I've done this a couple of, we've all done this probably sometimes, where it's just really encouraging someone, hey, have you talked with that person? Have you said hi to them? Oh, no, I haven't. Well, get on, call them, set it up. And then I've heard a few times after doing that, which I think is kind of an informal version of probably your community partnership connection, Eileen, that you guys are doing. But I think that, that's important. And I think, like you were joking, Claire, about this group doesn't really like to use their phones. They don't really like to do that. But whatever version it is, I think there just needs to be, there's just there's more need for us to be overt on a lot of fronts. There's more need to be overt about taking time off, to your point, Renu, about being burnt out and not knowing. I never in my entire career have I ever really worked anywhere that really encouraged using the out of office reply, because you kind of got dinged for it. Let's be honest. You did. I mean, if you put that on in some of my old agencies, you might as well just resign, because what? You're going to make it seem like you're actually really not working. So we've made it a policy. When you're gone, you have to turn it on. And we as leaders do it just to try to help sort of put those boundaries in place. So I think, things like that help. I think being overt about trying to get people to connect, even though they're not in the same space. I think there's just, the whole thing is we have to be way more intentional. Whereas I think before, a lot of this stuff could just sort of happen organically, and now we're having to be a bit more prescriptive, which is kind of the flip of what I said earlier about being more flexible. But I think that's a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I get a little philosophical about this question, because I think part of what's happening now is really challenging our legacy thinking. That's what I think the past 2.5 years has been about. And so when we think about culture, we have a tendency to say that culture can only happen within a physical location. But it really isn't. I mean, culture is an implied notion, and it's about, traits and behaviors and beliefs that we show up with. And so we're still doing that. I keep emphasizing we haven't lost it. We've definitely lost the connectivity, but the idea that we can have culture unless we're in a location, I think is something that we're going to prove is not actually the case. Mm-hmm. But it's going to take a lot of the things, Kate, that you're saying to really reestablish those connections. But I don't think we're losing culture as a result.
Evolving it.
And redefining as we go, as we are with everything.
Yeah, I think it's the connections we're losing, but I think people are now being, as you, it's like being very intentional about, okay, let me connect you to that. Maybe I think we have to be very robust about the onboarding. Like, okay, let's show like what it needs to happen within the first 6 months of you coming here, and various teams, and what do they mean, and having the information out there on a platform that employee can reference back to constantly, our leaders can reference back to, is important. From a culture perspective, like at Canessa, Matterkind, and Axiom, like one of the things that we want as a cultural of our company is autonomy. We've hired you to come work here. You're taking care of our business. You're taking care of our clients. So our culture is a culture of autonomy. We know if you can go take care of it. So as long as and then that ties into our values. So as long as that, what we're standing for, and we're always respecting and tying it all back to our values, that's our culture. We're not going to lose it. Connections, we are. So I think we need to continue to be intentional about our connections. But I think culture is such a broad term.
Yeah, mm-hmm. But I love the idea of autonomy. I think that's really smart, and it's a good leverage point for you.
Yeah, I love the culture of autonomy. I think it sets the bar high for anybody that comes into the organization at any level. This is the expectation. And then the rest of our job, to your point, is to make sure that they've got the tools, the support, the connections, the access to other humans to round out their experience. We're actually about to wrap up and go into Q&A, but one of the questions is about something Renu just mentioned, which is the onboarding practice. So how are you all changing and evolving how you're onboarding your talent in a remote environment? And any best practices there? Because we're going through this a lot right now. We're going through a major overhaul of our onboarding.
Yeah, so we are doing the same thing. I think that's what, like, when the moment a year and a half ago, we realized we weren't utilizing our technology platform. So we use Avature as our technology partner. So we're really now maximizing the capability we have in the platform to do onboarding in a consistent manner globally. So from a message from the CEO to a message from your team leader to a message from your regional leader, and to what are the various connections, people you need to meet, and what do those people do before you go into it. And then we're also, for the junior levels, we're creating a 1-week training program, just get them to teach the tools, where the various resources are, so they don't really start their job till post a week of their onboarding. Because what we were finding in the past, they sat next to somebody, and that person was able to show them what they needed to do and how to navigate. So as we realized that connection was lost, it's like, okay, how do we can maybe use this as in a manner where we're bringing consistency globally across all of our teams. So we're leveraging some of the technology, which is right now is Avature, and then our internal built platform to really get the information in our people's hand in a more digestible manner. Because at one point we started out with so much information, and everybody was like, a week, I can't remember anywhere you told me where it was. So I was like, okay, now we're going to redefine, and we're creating an information or internal platform in a way that it's digestible to somebody that's just joining, versus somebody who wants to just reference back to it 6 months, 12 months down the line.
Yeah, I think tech can play a huge part in the onboarding in a way that it, to your point, not everybody's going to remember everything you teach them on day one. Yeah. So what other tech tools are we giving people when they get here? Eileen, is there anything that you're doing differently from an onboarding perspective?
Well, similar to what Renu has shared, we've been evaluating it, and we're in the process of developing it so that it is more digestible. We're looking at a couple of different platforms, but it is centered around the community and the community of the circles and the cohorts, recognizing the people that are joining. How do we create the most relevant cohort of community to reinforce what they're learning and doing it in a way that's together as opposed to individual. But it's very much a work in progress. And I think onboarding, based on my years in the business, it's also one of those things that you're constantly having to upgrade it. You're constantly having to reevaluate it. You can't rest on what was. And so it's always a work in progress, how we onboard, because everything keeps changing within our organization. And so we have to constantly update how we're going about it. And I don't think that we've kind of cracked the code yet, whether it's live, whether it's through video, whether it's through these community circles, all of that has to be in play. But, I think you're lucky that you're in a place where you have some technology to support. We're in the process of developing that as well.
Mm-hmm. I think we've got time for one last question. I'll kick this over to Kate. Kate, what adjustments have you made when it comes to recruiting right now?
Okay, so first off, we were always, when we started the agency, some of us were remote, and so that's been kind of in our DNA. But I do think we've just broadened that even more, and we've started to open up little mini hubs, little mini office hubs. It's like after the third or fourth person gets hired in this city, then it's like, hey, you know what, let's get them a space now that we're back in a space, and so they don't have to travel back to San Francisco all the time, but whether it's Miami, whether it's Boulder, we're starting to have little mini hubs, and I think that helps with the connection part. And so I think for us, continuing to try and find new recruiting streams, if you will. And that this is less about remote hybrid and more about just, me as, DE&I leader at the agency, of just trying to open our eyes and where we're looking for people and the people that we're trying to actually bring in to advertising. So I think that's been one of our biggest things. We've always been very open to it, but I think there are certain titles and positions that in the past we wouldn't have been that we now are. And then I think to the conversation we had a bit ago, then it's on us if that person is someone who, if it's a young creative team and they're not going to be in San Francisco working with the rest of the creatives, then we have to work harder to make sure that they're actually attached and a part of the organization and feeling like they're in the group. And it's just a little bit more onus on the managers to make that happen. So hopefully that answers.
Yeah, I think we could have another whole segment on recruiting alone. So maybe we'll be able to talk about that next year. But we're actually out of time. I wanted to thank all of you for the insights today. I've learned a lot, and for all of you listening in at home or the office, again, I hope we'll be able to see each other soon. And thank you all, and thank you to the 4a's. It's been a really great panel.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.